Good morning, everyone. So welcome to the very first session today for the Slow Food Youth Network International Drink Festival. I'm just going to hold a wee second, let some people join us. Hopefully you've got a cup of coffee to help start your day off. It's my very first Instagram live I've ever done, so quite nerve-wracking. Good morning. I do have a very interesting setup, so my camera could fall at any time, so let's see how we get on. Morning network. Oh, hi Andy, good morning. So I think we'll start, because time is quite tight. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at a drink I particularly like to ferment called Kvass. Before we do that, just for those of you that are from the slow food side of things, that maybe haven't come across me before, my name is Amy, aka Hipstersandhobos. What I do is I'm a professional forager. I take members of the public for walks, introduce them to different types of wild plants, fungi, fruit, nuts, really whatever we can find that's out there. And for me it's all about restoring this knowledge that we used to have, helping people really connect with nature through the best way possible, which is by eating it. So for me it's about restoring the skill of how to find out what's wild, what's out there, what is food for us. So I teach people how to go about the identification process. Good morning to everybody else that's joined, it's fabulous. I didn't quite expect to see too many people first thing in the morning, so thank you for getting out of your bed to join. So as well as teaching the public about wild things, I also work with a number of local projects to do with sustainability, such as Leith Carbon College. I do quite a lot for Slow Food in Scotland, and I also professionally work with the beer industry, whether it's looking at wild food, wild botanicals, and how we can get this kind of sense of place, put it into beer, or also things to do with equality and gender. So drinks today, I've actually diverted away from beer a little. I really enjoy fermentation, and because of this I like to look at, well, what's out there, what different ferments do we have. I also really love looking at food waste, sustainability, what can we do sort of on a practical everyday level. And for me this is where Kvass really comes in. As a drink, it's not particularly Scottish. It really is from Russia, Lithuania, other countries within Eastern Europe. It's a fermented bread drink. It doesn't maybe sound brilliant when you put it like that, but if you think about it a bit like a table beer, we did used to make beer using bread as the basis, especially if you look at the Romans and how they brewed. So using bread as a basis for fermentation is not a new thing. So really simple, and for me this is why it's a beautiful thing, is you take this bread, you take stale bread. So if anybody that's watching is a bit of a fan of sourdough, perfect place to start. It's not always easy to manage to eat a whole loaf of sourdough in the sort of 2 days you've got after making it. So any of that product you've got left at the end, you don't need to throw it away. Likewise, if you buy bread in, bread, at least in the UK, is one of the products we throw out the most. But it's okay, keep that bread. All you need to do is cut up the stale bread, toast it until it's golden. And that's where we start. That's where we start with kvass. So we take this toasted bread, we add it into some boiling water, and you need some sort of sugar to start the process off. So usually raisins is the sort of traditional thing you'd use. Now, if you were in Lithuania or Russia, you'd probably be using something like black bread, rye bread, something really, really dark. But you don't have to. It's really, for me, about taking this and making it something that fits into my lifestyle and what I already use. So whatever bread you have, toast it off, some raisins, some currants. I've done one just to kind of talk about and show you, and I've used dates. So it's really whatever you've got that you need to use up in terms of dried fruit. So your toasted bread, your dried fruit and boiling water, and you leave it for about 12 hours. So that's what we've got here, and you can see the kind of golden colour that's come partly from the bread, partly from the dates, but also it's quite cloudy, you can't really see through this. And that's because of the grain that's dissolved into the water. What we're doing is we are creating food, and we're creating food for fermentation. And this is why it's a perfect thing to make if you make sourdough. What you need next is your sourdough starter. This is quite active at the moment. And all you need to do, sourdough starter goes into your bread, and you give that a really good mix together. Once you've done this, you're going to add in some sugar. Now, this is going to be used up in the fermentation, so it doesn't really matter if you want to use white sugar or brown sugar, or you can use honey. And each of these are going to give you a different flavour, but the sugar itself is going to be used up in the fermentation. Now, I would say you don't want to really use bleached sugar. Generally in any kind of fermentation, it's best to avoid this. It just takes away some of the chemicals that are going to otherwise be in your end product, and potentially it might inhibit the fermentation as well. So once you've done that, this is your kind of first real stage of your fermentation, and it's going to happen really quickly. And again, this is why kvass is great. It's not a ferment, it's not like a beer where it's taking you 5 hours to make it and then you've got at least 2 hours until you're going to be able to drink that. You can drink your kvass in 2 to 3 days after making it. So as an example, this is one that I made just last night, and you can already see that really, really lively fermentation that's going on in there. You can see as well, sourdough starters settled to the bottom. So this is not going to taste crazy funky. It tastes a little bit like bread, but not in a bad way. It's very much like a table beer. But what we can do is we can flavour it now. So during our fermentation, we can put in whatever that we want just to add flavour into the kvass. Because we're right in the middle of berry season, I've got some blackcurrants just from the garden. So you want fruit again that's organic, you don't want any kind of pesticides on there. So pop that in with your kvass. You don't want to seal the jar during your fermentation because it's fast and it'll explode. Yeah, exactly, bubbling. You can hear that pop already, right? I only just opened it. So leave it open, but some muslin over the top, just because, again, we're in fruit fly season and we don't want fruit flies in our kvass, although it does add some extra protein potentially. So yeah, so any flavour you can put into your kvass. If you want to have something more like a beer, more like a table beer, add hops. It will absolutely work to dry hop it with a small number of hops. In terms of looking at quantities, how much do you need for what amount? I would note that you don't want to put in too much sugar, it'll stop the yeast from working. You don't want to add too little sugar because it's not going to ferment enough. I have got a PDF which I've uploaded to the youth network, so they'll be able to share that with you, and I will pop down as well any kind of quantities. But to give you an idea, for 1 litre I tend to use 2 tablespoons of sourdough starter, and I use 2 tablespoons of either sugar or honey. Now, time wise, 2 to 3 days. On day 3, pop it in the fridge. You want to taste it. If it's still too sweet for you, let it ferment some more. It can be drunk quite dry, or it can be drunk quite sweet. It's just really up to you what you're going to want, what you're going to enjoy. For me, one of the things I really, really love about Kvass is that you can put anything in it. You can really sort of play about with your flavours. Fruit's great, any kind of berries, but obviously I'm a foraging background, and that's kind of the thing that I love. So when you're out and about, it's about, well, what from nature can I bring in, can I add into the drink, have an experiment. There's a lot of flowers out about now, so things like roseberry willow herb flowers, they will bring this amazing sort of pink colour in and through your drink. You can add elderflower, that's nice and simple, or elderberries when they come. Anything like that, though, think about tannins. If you put in a big handful of elderberries, it's going to be really dry and maybe quite difficult to drink. Yeah, any kind of flower works quite well. Meadowsweet's really nice. The only thing you really need to watch out for when you're using wild plants, some of them are super yeasty, so it's sometimes nice to do an infusion into water and then use that water once you've drained it as your basis for your first stage of the Kvass. Otherwise, you're going to get crazy funky flavours because the wild yeast could outcompete the yeasts that are present in your sourdough starter. The other thing that you want to do is, well, first of all, obviously think about where you're picking from. Don't take from a roadside, because again, we don't want any chemicals in our drink. But that kind of goes for foraging anyway. Aside from that, some things, yes, you'll want to cook up beforehand. Mostly try to not. Just because you can get that kind of stewed, cooked, almost caramelised flavour that's not always what kind of goes with it. Now, some plants, such as meadowsweet, have antiseptic qualities, and because we're fermenting with sourdough, we're not just fermenting with yeast. Our sourdough is both made from wild yeasts and lactobacillus. So our bacterial cultures, the antibacterial properties, antiseptic qualities in some wild herbs can inhibit the bacteria, and then your drink will taste super yeasty and you won't get that kind of slight sour tang going through it, and your fermentation might not really turn out quite as you want it. So yeah, be kind of aware of what you're using if you're adding foraging things. But again, it's all about experimentation. So have a go, have a play. It'd be wonderful to kind of see from people if anyone has a go of Kvass. What do you think of it? Try about with different styles of breads. How does that affect it? If it's seeded bread, it still works, so don't worry about using seeded bread. If it's darker bread, you're going to get that kind of more sort of rye, malty flavours coming through. Not so much if you use white bread. So see what works in that side of things. If you compare it to beer, your bread is your malts. So it's the same process as what you get from your malt. It's giving you that kind of colour, that flavour, and it's giving you additional sugar to break down for your yeast and bacteria. Have a play with some hops, see what you think, have a play with some fruits and some wild herbs, and it'd be interesting to see some different recipes coming through. If you do want to have a little bit of a look, I absolutely endorse and highly recommend Pascal, I think Boder is how you say his second name, based across in the US, and He's written an entire book about wild ferments and has a huge chapter on Kvass, so it's a great thing to look up, and gives you some really crazy recipes where he's found so many things from his local environment and added them in. So yeah, have a play, see what you can come up with. Now, Kvass is alcoholic. As I say, it's kind of similar to a table beer. Interestingly enough, I believe it's quite frequently drunk by children instead of sort of Coca-Cola, if you like, in Eastern Europe, which is awesome, but it's not actually massively alcoholic. It's really kind of similar to either sort of kefir or kombucha. So I would say you're looking at below 5% if you make it yourself. It's usually going to be sitting sort of around about the 2% mark, but it depends how long you ferment it for. So really, I would probably not give it to the kids, just in case, because when you're doing it at home, you don't have the same controls that you have if you're doing it on a more commercial scale. Home brewers among us, if we've got some home brewers, they might have the equipment at home to be able to measure your ABV. But yeah, it's going to be sitting at around a table beer, really about 2% most of the time for the stuff that you make at home. If you want to try real life Kvass, there are a number of shops that sort of import it, and actually I've also found it in Sainsbury's, so it is possible to try the sort of imported stuff, which will give you a good idea of the more, I guess, authentic version rather than the drink that you do yourself at home. So yeah, so for me, really nice alternative to beer, great in the afternoon, and that's why I love Kvass. It's a nice, quick and easy and playful ferment. What would be really great, I know that it's early, so we've got loads of people who have popped in and out, but if anyone that's still here has any questions, it's a good time to ask. Otherwise, I'll kind of go back through just very quickly in a kind of point by point manner how to make it for people that want to do it along with some instructions later on. Okay, so as I mentioned, what I'm going to do for the next couple of minutes, I'll just go through in a kind of bullet point manner again the processes. As I say, I do have a PDF that you'll be able to download, and then I'll just allow you to ask some questions and I'll come back to them. So first stage, stale bread, dice it, toast it, soak it for 6 to 12 hours in water with dried fruit. Strain away the bread, we don't want chunky bread. Then add in sourdough starter, about 2 tablespoons per litre. Add in sugar or honey, about 2 tablespoons per litre. And also any flavours. You don't need to add in flavouring, you can just have it like that. But fruit, berries, wild botanicals, herbs, any kind of combination that you can think of. Leave it to ferment with the lid ajar for 2 to 3 days. Pop it into the fridge to slow the fermentation. Have a taste and leave it until it's reached your desired sweetness. Remember to burp it once you do that, otherwise you will have a Kvass all over the inside of your fridge, and that won't be very nice. So Youth Network have asked, what do I think tastes best with Kvass? For me, it's kind of like, because it is a beer, but it's a very light tasting one, so it's not too malty, it's not too hoppy, it's incredibly refreshing, so you can quite easily enjoy a glass of Kvass on a day like today, which is very warm. And yeah, it's not like, unlike beer can be a bit heavy sometimes, especially if it's just during the day. You don't get that. It's somewhere in between a soda, a soft drink, and an alcoholic drink. So that's why I like Kvass. Oh, sorry, I misread that. What herb do I think tastes best with Kvass? I apologise. Herbs, for me, I think using something like yarrow is quite interesting because it's a bittering herb. So you can always make it a bit like a gruit, which is a wild beer that we used to make in the UK. Basically, the gruit is a blend of herbs that you would have used to flavour beer, and that's before we had hops. If you think back a few hundred years ago, we didn't have any access to hops, particularly in Scotland, because of weather. It's just not nice enough for the hop plant to want to grow. It's not hot enough, it's not dry enough, and actually we don't have enough hours of daylight, so hops just don't grow here. But using a blend of wild herbs allowed us to kind of create a flavoured beer. One of those that you would have almost always found was yarrow, and its sort of role in this herb blend was to create bitterness. So if you want to create a Kvass that tastes more like a beer and less like a soda or a fruit drink or a kombu, so a bit more beery, add in things like yarrow or mugwort, and that gives that bitterness. Alternatively, to do something kind of a little bit more summery, absolutely some elderflower. And if you pair that elderflower with a fruit, elderflower and raspberry would be quite nice, or elderflower and gooseberry perhaps, and that's just going to give you that kind of light, almost sweet floral flavour alongside the sort of juiciness of the berries, and yeah, that's absolutely delightful. Another combination that I've tried that is supreme, if anybody's got access to salt marshes where they are, some marsh samphire, tastes like salt. It's like eating a burst of salt, and combining that with gooseberries in Kvass, you get this kind of beautiful salty gooseberry flavour, a little bit of tang from the sourdough, and yeah, you're kind of getting into sour beer territory, but not quite as sour as that, and that's a really sort of nice, interesting flavour combination. So we've got a couple of minutes left if anybody else has any questions. Welcome to the other couple of people that have joined us this morning. This is not Kvass, this is coffee. I'm still in the first cup of the day. So thanks very much. Just before we wrap it up, so Slow Food Youth Network, fantastic organisation. It's been wonderful to be asked to contribute to this festival for them as I guess a representative of Scotland, which is really lovely, and nice to be able to kick off today's Drinks Festival. If you pop onto their Instagram, you'll find that there's a list of different programmes that run throughout the entire day today, so wonderful to dip in and out of. I'm particularly interested this afternoon, there's somebody doing a bit on wild beer, which is my thing as well, so I'm really interested to pop into that. So what you want to do is pop on to the next live stream now. You've got time to grab yourself a cup of coffee, get seated, and yeah, spend a day of drinks from all across the world.